Hi friend! I am so excited to paint with you today. I just wanted to give you a couple reminders that at certain points in this video we are speeding up to just make things go a little quicker, but please feel free to pause the video and go at your own pace, rewind, fast forward, whatever works best for you, whatever makes it easier for you to paint. If you're just stumbling upon this video, this is a paint along for a watercolor kit that I sell in my online shop. If you're interested in getting one of your own, definitely go check that out with the link below. And if you're curious to see more about what all the kit entails, check out at the end of the video. I show you what the kit looks like and you can get one for yourself. And if by the time you're watching this, the kit has already sold out, make sure you hop on my newsletter because that is where you are going to get updates about when new releases are coming out or if we're doing a limited number of reprints. So if you want to make sure you snag one, the newsletter is the place to be. So the link is below for that. Happy painting, friends! Hey there, I'm Kate. I'm a watercolor artist and welcome to my channel. Together we're going to break down watercolor concepts so you can feel empowered to dive into the world of watercolor and make a splash. Let's do it! I'm so excited to start this painting pack. We are going to start with the Sunflower Bouquet. I love this design because the sunflowers are just bursting forward and it makes me so ready for fall. So let's go ahead and dig in. I am going to start with this one right here because this one is in the foreground. So I'm going to use my yellow ochre. I'm going to get a nice paint puddle ready for that. If you haven't wet your paints already, go ahead and take your paints and either drop some water onto it or use a little spray bottle. Now that my paint puddle's ready, I'm actually just going to wet. I have just a little bit of paint, but I'm going to wet all this whole sunflower. And this is going to allow me to use the wet technique to fill up the sunflower and make some really beautiful color bursting happen. I love this yellow ochre because it's a little bit muted and has this kind of cloudy, creamy aspect to it. I just think it's perfect for getting ready for fall and getting all those cozy vibes. It just makes me so happy. All right, so I've got a nice base layer here. Now I'm going to take my Van Dyke brown and I'm going to mix it a little bit with the burnt sienna to get a nice warm brown here. And I'm just going to dab that in the middle of our sunflower, not too close to the edge. This is going to give that nice fuzzy feeling for the sunflower. And pardon my dogs, they are so noisy. And we're going to go ahead and just drop a little bit more of the darker part, just the Van Dyke brown, right into the center here. And we're going to wait for this to dry a little bit. Okay, next we're going to move on to this sunflower up here. And the reason for that is that it is not touching this one because we don't want our color to spill over quite yet. When you're painting with watercolor, if you have a wet area and it touches another wet area, that paint will seep into each other. And I'm just not quite ready for that to happen yet. So Murphy is our Great Dane and Lily is our pointer. Murphy's almost 5 and Lily is 11 and a half. And we have horses that walk up and down our street. We don't have enough property for a horse, but our neighbors down the street do, and they just get very excited. So I think a horse was just going by, or it might have been the donkey. Sometimes they walk their donkey on a leash, and it's It's like they're walking their dog, but it's a donkey. It's so funny. Alright, so I am adding in the yellow here. Alright, so now I'm grabbing some of my sap green, and we're going to go ahead, and I like to start at the part that's not touching. So we're going to go down all the way to this sunflower, and then we're just ever so gently going to let these connect. So you get just a hint of that sap green in there. And I might put just a touch of that dark in there. All right. I'm going to move on to this sunflower, and this one I think we're going to do is one of those more reddish ones. So I'm going to start with my base of yellow ochre, and then we're going to add in some burnt sienna, wet and wet, once we've done that. And if you got the brushes with your paint pack, these are round brushes, and they're really great because you can use just the very tip of them for detail points, but you can also use the fat belly of the brush, which is this side part here, and that you can use to fill in larger spaces. It's such a versatile brush. The largest one is a size 5, but then we also have smaller detail ones that come in the pack. If you already have your own brushes, that's awesome too. There's something so relaxing about this. Okay, now I'm going to take my burnt sienna, and we're just going to tap, tap, tap it into the tips. And if you're finding that it's not really spilling into the rest of it, it might be because that part has already dried. So you may need to re-wet it. Okay, just adding in some nice red to the tips. And again, this is not super, super detailed. We're just letting the paint do its thing. We are wet on wet. And just that subtle pop of color does such a nice job differentiating it from the other sunflowers. Okay, there we go. Okay, for this one, we're going to do yellow ochre. And again, I picked this one because it is not touching any of the other ones. Just be careful that your hand doesn't get in these ones if you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, this probably won't be an issue. Usually I like to work from the top corner down to the bottom corner like I'm reading, so that my hand doesn't drag through, but we're just hopping around here, giving your little wrist a workout. If you find you keep bumping it, you can always just use a hair dryer to blow dry it so it dries faster, or just take a little breather in between each flower. Sometimes it's nice to just stop and smell the roses, or in this case, the sunflowers. And I think I want to do the burnt sienna here again, just at the very tip, and I'm actually grabbing a little bit more pigment this time. I want it to be a little bit more brilliant, a little more vibrant. I don't know about you, but this is really making me want to have some sort of yummy fall drink. Oh, I love that. All right, and I'm gonna do a little bit of darkness in the middle. So my Van Dyke brown. Again, I'm not going all the way to the edge because this will spread out. We're already working with wet paint. I just love how it kind of gives this fuzzy, actually even gonna add more in here now that it's already dried. And it is just the right amount of dry to give exactly the texture that I want. Yes. See how it just gives that fuzzy feeling? Ah, perfect. Since we're at it, let's just add a little bit there. Okay, and we'll leave this one. We'll come back to you, don't you worry. Let's do some leaves here. So we have this permanent sap green. I'm actually going to add just a hint of this burnt sienna because the permanent sap green is like a little intense for our color palette. So burnt sienna has a lot of red in it, and that's a really great tip if you're wanting to tone down your colors to make them not quite so vibrant, is just add a color from the opposite end of the color wheel. So if you look here, this is the color wheel and we have green. So this is like right here. And the opposite of it, I don't know if you can even see, is going to be red. This little mark right here shows me that. So I just added some red in there. You can see it's just, ooh, too much. Just a little bit more muted. And that is exactly the tone that I want. It's exactly the look that I want for this painting. Okay, just cleaning off my brush a little bit here. Ooh. Okay, so we've got a couple little leaves in here. Nothing too wild. We're just gonna fill those in with green. Might add in some little shadows later. And just around the base of it, where the flowers are, I'm just going to add in a little bit of darkness, a little extra pigment there, to just indicate that it's probably got some shadows, whereas this part is more in the sun. All right, let's go ahead and move on to this little one right here. I love just the pop of green, the subtle pop of green in these designs. This market sunflower bouquet. I love fall farmers markets, like those little mini donuts, and they smell like cinnamon, and get the apples, all the sunflowers. Oh, it's just the best. Some curlicue. Oh, we got a couple leaves. So there are some leaves in here, but I'm actually going to skip those ones for now. We're gonna go ahead and do these ones because I don't want this green to encroach onto the sunflower, and I'm not sure that it's dry all the way. I think it might be okay. We'll try it. You know what? If it spills into it, that's okay. Happy accidents, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint almost up to the line, but not quite to it. Just give it a little bit of breathing room. And now, actually, if you look and see, this brown is actually creeping a little bit more than I wanted to. So what I've done is I've dried off my brush, and I'm just picking it up almost like I'm sopping up a spill on the counter, just because I want to keep these kind of bright, kind of yellowy. And we're going to go over it again with more yellow ochre. If I have too much paint on my brush, I just wet it. We're just soaking it up. Perfect. That's exactly where I want it. And then we can add a little more green. Just be careful because the other shape is wet. So don't go too close. And I think we might just take a little break to let these ones dry. Oh no, we have one more fun thing that we can do before we do that. Okay. And we're gonna wait on that leaf. So we have this bow down here, and I really want to bring in this alizarin crimson. I just love this color. But I'm going to mix it a little bit with this Perlin violet, and we're going to use this for the bow. Got a nice little silk bow here attached. This way when we come back to paint the paper bag, the bow won't be wet. This Perlin violet is almost my secret weapon. It is just such a beautiful color, and I feel like when you add it with other colors, it just gives this richness. I love using it with oranges to add a shadow on orange. It is just, oh, perfection. So this part, this is like the paper of the wrapping. So we're gonna skip that part and then just do the little extra tag of ribbon right here. We'll go back in and add a little shadow there. I'm gonna add just an extra little dab darkness or pigment in here to show that that is probably the spot that's more covered by shadow. And we will come back to this in a little bit. Go take a break, get a snack. I'm gonna get some coffee and I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. So we are going to be working on this sunflower right here. If you're not sure if it's dry, you can go ahead and hover your finger over the paper. And if it feels like there's a cool little whisper, it means it's not quite dry yet. If you don't feel that cool little whisper, then it's probably ready to go, and you can just quickly tap and you're good to go. All right, let's go ahead and dig into this one right here. I'm just going really hard into that yellow ochre. I want this one to be nice and rich. And here I'm using a ceramic plate, but really anything would work. You could use a little kitchen plate. If you have an artist's palette, you can do plastic, or really there are a lot of things that you probably have on hand that you could use easily. I like ceramic because it doesn't puddle into, sometimes when you use plastic it can puddle and clump the water, whereas when you use ceramic I think it just spreads out more nicely and allows me to really grab the colors that I want. I also like using a white plate because then I can really see the colors that I'm picking up. Watercolor is transparent, so if you're using, let's say, a blue plate and you're trying to get some yellow paint, it might be hard to see what the color actually looks like because it might actually look green when it's on your blue plate. And if you have paints at home and want to try this out, adding in a little bit of a brighter orange can be a really fun addition to this as well. So I dropped in a little bit of that Van Dyke brown, and I've cleaned my brush off, and then I am just kind of coaxing it to where I want it to be. I know it's going to spread a little bit more, so I don't want to do too much fussing, but I'm just kind of getting it in the zone of where I'd like it to be eventually. I'm going to go ahead and turn my paper, and we're going to work on this leaf. So it looks like my brush still had a little bit of that Van Dyke brown in it, and I don't hate it. I like this earthy green. This is definitely an aesthetic piece. One of the fun things about working with a limited palette is that it pushes you to try different color combinations that you might not have done originally. Like, this is definitely, I would have probably fussed a really long time to get the green just right, and I actually really like what's happening here. I'm even gonna add a little bit of it on top of this leaf because I like it so much. I'm realizing that that sunflower's wet, so I don't want to do too much of it. Okay, let's see. Let's do this one, and we're gonna actually do one of those reddish, I almost said strawberries. What are these, sunflowers? Okay, so I'm grabbing my burnt sienna and my alizarin crimson. And we're just gonna go on in. You're gonna be like, oh my gosh, it's so dark. Ah, we could do it. Look at it go. Oh, what a beautiful color. I love it. It's so pretty. You can tell I'm excited. I'm like not doing a very good job staying in the lines because I just like this color so much. Okay, now I'm really getting wild. I'm just gonna take a little bit of my towel. Just focus, Kate, focus. Okay. Again, we're just going to add in some of that Van Dyke brown for the center. I don't want to do a ton because I know it's going to spread a lot, but I do love to get it in there when it's wet on wet. Probably add a little bit more later, but just want to get a little bit of a base layer. And you know what? I love this so much. I think we're going to actually do this one with it too. So we're mixing up more burnt sienna and a little bit of that alizarin crimson. And sometimes I mix colors on my palette, but sometimes I like to mix it in the wet paint. So you'll see that I just went right into the crimson. I didn't even mix it up on the palette first because I just wanted to spill a little crimson in, and makes me feel really wild, but I love it. Like you just kind of let the water take control. The Carrie Underwood song. Water, take the wheel. And you'll see that I'm keeping this edge, because we are covering a larger area, I'm trying to keep this edge wet so that it doesn't create a hard drying line. So occasionally as I'm coming through along the bottom, I will be freshening up that middle area along the line to make sure that it's staying wet and not drying too much. I don't think I've talked about this paper yet. This is Arches, or it's actually pronounced Arche, but everybody says Arches, watercolor paper, and it is my absolute favorite paper. This paper is so great at holding the water. Like you'll notice as you're painting that the paint doesn't just get sucked right up into the paper. That is because it holds the water, and this allows you to have a lot more room to kind of wiggle with it when it's wet, which is, I like a lot of wiggle room on my paper. And the ridges on it, you'll see it has a really nice toothiness, which is those ridges. And that's because this is cold pressed paper. You can tell the difference between cold pressed paper and hot pressed paper because hot pressed paper is flatter and smoother. Just think about if you were using a flat iron or just a regular iron. It's meant to smooth things out. So cold press is going to have a little bit more ridges. Ridges! Alright, let's add some of that Van Dyke brown. I'm not even going in for the burnt sienna because I want that contrast. Again, we're just dipping it right in the middle. I really didn't grab too much. I don't want it to overpower. So this one's going to be our star. I thought it was going to be this one, but you know, it's turning out to be this beautiful babe right here. Okay. And then I think I'm going to do another really bold yellow one. Right here. So I do have to be careful because that edge is still drying, but I might just let them kind of kiss and see what happens. And the paint we're using today is mostly Winsor & Newton professional grade watercolor. The Van Dyke brown is Daniel Smith, and these are all watercolors that professional artists use because they are highly pigmented. So if you've ever used a set that you get maybe from like the kids section or something, you might notice that the colors aren't as deep. Like I am using a very little amount of paint, but it's still just so bold and bright. And that is what makes the difference between professional grade and student grade watercolors. And when you're done with this kit, you can even keep these little dots and use them on another project. Okay, I think I'm gonna do it. Okay, so we're getting close. I just want just a little bit. So I'm not putting a ton of water over there. I'm actually keeping it pretty dry, but I'm just ever so slightly wetting the edge and letting them connect. Okay, it may not be as dramatic as I was thinking because this is actually almost pretty dry. Oh yeah, I am loving this. So cute. Okay, so let's grab a little bit of that Van Dyke brown. We're gonna bop it here in the middle. Okay. And now we can start working on parts of our paper packaging. So to do the paper packaging, I am going to take the Van Dyke brown. I'm going to take some yellow ochre. Actually a lot of yellow ochre. You get dark baby in there. This is a little gray, so I might add some burnt sienna. Not too much, just a little bit. I think I might add, we're looking for that butcher paper color. So almost every single color. Cool it down just a little bit. And you want to have a fair amount of this mixed up because we are going to use a lot of it. Alright, and if you are not sure about the color, you can always turn your paper over and just do a little tester. I think that's going to be perfect. Okay, are we ready? Let's do it! So I am going to start this part right here, and I actually don't want it to be super dark, so I'm adding more water in. I just want it to be really subtle. The paper is not the star of the show here, so it's mostly water and just a little bit of that big color mixture that we mixed up. We're just filling in the spaces that don't have flowers. This is all that butcher paper. Anytime I paint butcher paper, it always makes me think of brown paper packages tied up with string, because that is one of my favorite things. Sound of Music and Presents. And just, you know, keep an eye out, like this part is maybe a little bit darker than the other part, so I'm just going to take some of the pigment, kind of soaking it up like a sponge. I can move up to this corner. And really subtle. We don't want the paper to take over the show. Now remember, we just painted these sunflowers kind of recently, so just be aware. Make sure your edge is mostly dry, or all the way dry if you don't want it to have a little happy accident. But I'm feeling brave today. Okay, we are done with the paper. Now I'm going to come back in because this is just a really subtle, and you know we love to make a splash. So I'm going to come back in and add some pizzazz. So let's go ahead and start with this one. We're going to take some yellow ochre. I want it to be a little bit darker in the center. So I've put a lot of pigment there, and then I'm just pushing it down just a little bit. And I've dried my brush off, and I'm just blending those edges just to give it a little more personality. So really I'm just going around the center of the flower with a lot of that yellow ochre pigment, and then I'm coming back with my brush, basically a dry brush, and I am going from the top of the flower and blending in. The reason why I go from the top of the flower and I'm drawing my brush in between is so that I'm not picking as much of that pigment that's in the center. It's just really subtle. So you'll see I'm kind of wiping my towel in between each move, each petal. There we go. Ooh la la. I like this little cute, oh my goodness, too much water. So just soak it up like a mop. This technique is called lifting. So you're just lifting the color off the page. Okay, and I like this kind of strokiness here, so we're just gonna leave that little mama. Say okay. And then I'm gonna take a little bit more of my Van Dyke brown mixed with burnt sienna, and I'm just gonna give a little bit, just using the tip of my brush, to give us a little texture in here. And I'm taking my brush and I'm drying it. It's still a little damp, and I'm just tapping my damp brush in with just water. So this is making a little wet and wet move that is bringing a nice texture into the center. And I'm trying to be careful to not touch too much of the yellow. Oh, how cute are you? I love it. Okay, let's move on to, let's do this one the same way. This top little cutie. Alright, so again, remember at the base, we add a lot of color. Then we're gonna fan it out. And I'm not gonna worry about these ones back here because they're on the outer edge. So they're going to be a little bit lighter anyway. I'm starting at the top when I fan, keeping my dry brush, mostly dry. You may need to dip your brush in water in between to get some of the pigment off. Okay, I like what's happening here. I'm just, you know what? I think there's a little too much, so I'm just using my brush. I just want it here and there. You can really go into it and do some of the petals darker than others, but we're just doing, for this example, we're just keeping it easy breezy lemon squeezy. All right, I'm just gonna do a little bit of that, a little bit of my brown. Okay, I kind of like that this one's more subtle. I am going to pay a little more attention to this one with the center. So I like that it's just subtle, but again, we're gonna take our paintbrush and we're gonna just collect this with some pigment, just kind of irregular shapes. You can go in a circle, sort of, but don't make it too geometrical or else it starts to get like kind of weird, because nature isn't exactly perfect. Okay, I'm actually now going in with a dry brush and soaking up some of it because I feel like it's too dark. I'll probably come back in here with a little bit more, but for now, I'm liking it. We're gonna do this center right here. So I'm getting more of my Van Dyke brown. Again, I'm going in with a fair amount of pigment here, and I'm working in a somewhat circular fashion, but I don't want to have it be, I don't want it to be super methodical either. Unnaturally natural. I don't know. Now I'm taking my slightly damp brush and I'm just doing a little do. Just to give it a little bit of texture. I love a textured moment. Now I'm going to go ahead and move on to this one. Same dealio. And if you think about right here is going to be the darkest part because it's all the way hidden, especially if the sun's coming in from this top corner. I'm going to make that part pretty dark. I'm just coming in with my dry brush just to add a little riffraff there. We'll do the same to the centers of our reddish ones. These ones I'm going to go pretty dark to really give it nice contrast to the red color. I'm allergic to sunflowers and plants, but these must just look so real. Trigger my allergies. Okay. Think about where the sun is hitting it. So on the bottom left corners, the sun is coming from the top right corner. I like to darken it just a little bit to give it an extra bit of depth. This one is going to be pretty dark because it's not getting much sun at all. So we can actually go in there and do that. Let's give this one a little extra. Hi there, buddy. I like working when the paint is drying, but not all the way dry. It's a really great way to add in a little extra. Okay, now let's add some depth into these red sunflowers since they are our stars. So what we're going to do is we are going to take our crimson, and actually we're going to take a little bit of this purple to kind of cool it down a little bit. Just a slight bit of burnt sienna. Come here, buddy. And I am going to take it in all the spots that are kind of more behind. And if you want to use one of your smaller brushes for this one, go ahead. I'm doing the very back ones first, I think. I'll probably come in and do some mid-range. I'm just picking little ones here and there that look like they would be behind, getting a nice shadow. Then we're going to go in between these petals, so it'll really make the front ones pop out. I'm not doing quite as dark. Well, maybe. Why not? So the front ones, the ones that are like the topmost petals, I'm probably not even going to touch those ones at all. This is just to really give a sense of depth to these shapes. Flowers. Whoop. You know what? But that's okay. I like it. Look at that. Loving it. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing for this bottom flower here. Let's get on in there. For these back ones, those ones are going to be really dark. I'm not going to fuss with this too much, but I just want a little bit of petal variation here. Ooh, and you know what? That's okay. Bleeding a little bit, but we're just gonna let it happen. Okay, I like it. I like it. All right, so let's do the same thing to this one, and we're actually going to use some of the Van Dyke Brown with the yellow ochre. And the cool thing when you're painting with your palette here is some of those colors have already just mixed together naturally. So it's really fun to be like, oh, I actually think that color would be really nice. It's already there waiting for us. So again, just a little in-betweeny ones. It's just to give it a little bit of depth. So if you're like, oh no, that was the wrong one, it's okay. Don't sweat it. It's gonna look beautiful. Murphy's just walking along, singing his song. Probably somebody getting their mail. I'm gonna get some of these. A little bit of texture on the back end here. While I leave that part a little bit more. Just going in at the base. The base of the flower here. Or the base of the petal, excuse me, where it's connecting with the others, because that's going to be darker than the tip. All right. I think we are quickly approaching the end. Okay, so let's go in and we're going to add just a little bit more detail. I actually think I want a little more crimson. I almost want like, this bow is just not working for me. So let's do a little bit of crimson and a little bit of yellow ochre to get kind of an orange-ish. There we go. I thought I was going to use these colors, but I'm not going to, so. Alright, so we're going to just go ahead and paint. Let's just paint over the whole thing with a light layer of that new color that we created. Oh yeah, that's much better. So it's called a glaze when you paint one wash over another wash, and glaze is probably one of my favorite watercolor techniques to use because it gives it this depth that you don't get because you're layering these transparent paints, and then you get a little bit of the undertone, a little bit of the overtone. It's just so beautiful. It reminds me of stained glass. All right, that's a nice, beautiful fall color. And don't worry, we'll use more of that purple in some of the other designs. Okay, and I might take a little bit of the color that we used for the parchment paper and just do where the shadows would be, just to differentiate just a smidge. So I'm taking it around the edge here, and then I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to dry it, and I'm just going to smooth out this edge, just kind of feather it out so we get that natural, gentle line. So again, let's do it right here. This one actually doesn't have to be gentle because that's kind of that back side. Let's see. Do this part. Just to give it a little more dimension. Not make it be so flat. Ooh, oh my, that's way too much. It's okay. We're just gonna take our dry brush, just feather this out. We're all good and gravy. Okay, let's do a little bit under here. Remember, we just painted the ribbon though, so we don't want to, just be careful you don't touch the ribbon. You might want to take a little break, but I don't want to, I'm just so excited to finish. So I'm going right at the crease where the paper would be, and then I'm taking my brush and softening that edge. And I'm going to just darken it up in here. This is kind of that part of the paper that's going to be mostly in shadow. And then this part is probably going to be in shadow too. This part. A little bit right here. Okay, so let's let that dry for a little bit, and then we're going to come back and put the finishing touches on this beauty. See you in a bit. Alright, and we're back. We're going to just add some nice little details in here. So let's go ahead and start with the Van Dyke Brown, just to really make these babies pop. Just give it a little bit, kind of along a little semicircle along the bottom left, to really indicate a sense of depth. This one can kind of be over the whole thing. Okay. Just going around to all of them. Adding in just a little bit. A little extra pizzazz. Alright, now we're going to add a little depth to our ribbon. And this is going to be this part right in here. underside of the ribbon. Again, right here. We're going to do just a little bit like where the knot would be. We're going to feather that part out. So dry your brush off. Even do a little bit just down here. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, let's add just a little bit more to the paper. Our little croissant. I don't know why that's so funny to me. Okay. I'm drying my brush off. Feathering from dry to wet. Very good. Good little croissant. This part in here, I just feel like it needs to be darker because it's going to be totally behind the ribbon. Same thing here. We can maybe have like a little bit of lightness here. So dry your brush off. Okay. Nice. I'm going to make it nice and dark in here. That's the underside of the whole bit. Make sure you don't touch the ribbon part or else it's going to get a little pink. Oh. And a little bit more here. I feel like this would be a little bit darker. Maybe even like fading that out. Okay, I still want it a little bit darker here, where that flower is giving the shadow and where that paper is overlapping. Okay, I like it, I like it. And then let's darken it in here because the flowers are kind of gonna provide some shadow from the light. I don't want it too much, so I'm just going to gently add a little bit in here. And then I've taken my dry brush and I'm just scraping it up, sopping it up, doing a little lifting, and then I'm going to add a little more darkness over on that side. Maybe a little too much. Okay, I'm going to lighten this part right here. I would say, I think we're done. Great job, you guys. I'm sure it turned out beautifully. If you happen to paint this, I would love it if you would share. Just make sure and tag me at Splatter and Bloom. I cannot wait to see your work. I'll be sure to share it if I can, and thank you for following along. Stay tuned for the dahlia and the coneflowers.